Well,
right.
Kyle, kind of give us a little. I know Will knows a little bit more about you. I looked at your background. That's what kind of makes this show fun. Sometimes Will schedules the guests, sometimes I do, so it makes it fun. But obviously, you got a big background. I know a little bit about Yellow Diamond. I read up a little bit about Thrive, but yeah, maybe kind of give the viewers just kind of a brief background of yourself.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do that. So, again, I'm Kyle Wilson. Thanks for listening. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia right now, originally from Annapolis, Maryland. I moved down here in 2005 to go to Emory University. I graduated in 2009 with an economics degree. And if you guys remember, that was the recession. So there were no fancy economics jobs for me to get when I graduated. So I got the first job that was offered to me at a company called Echo Global Logistics. Truthfully, guys, I had no idea what an account manager was when I took the job. And pretty quickly, as most people listening to this podcast know, I found out it was cold calling. Nonetheless, though, I found out pretty quickly I was a great cold caller. I was sales rep of the year, both years that I was at Echo, which is about a $5 billion company. I think I'm the only person still to do that twice. And so since I was making about $35,000 a year at that point, I decided I should probably put those accolades on my resume and try to get a better paying job. And that landed me at a company called Trans Dynamics, which is outside the perimeter in Atlanta, Georgia. So this is a small company. The CEO was 82. The average salesperson was in their mid 50s. But I spent my 20s there. And that really, helped shape my overall logistics experience to be in that office where the whole business operated under one roof, right? So that was my experience. And so I had been doing it long enough in the sales position that when I turned 30, I kind of looked down, and Matt, this plays into what you do as an agent, but I kind of looked down at what I was making the company, what I was making myself. And I decided that if I was going to do the very hard job of being a freight broker for the rest of my life, that I was going to have to own the business and really increase that commission percentage from 10 to 15%, all the way up to as close to 100% as we could get it. So that's when I opened Yellow Diamond Logistics. And really the goal there was just to have a freight brokerage by myself. I just wanted to manage my own book of business, be self-sufficient, live a good life. But pretty quickly, I got kind of burnt out with the operational work. My skill is sales. I love making outbound calls. And so as soon as I saw that I wasn't able to make outbound calls 100% of the time anymore, I knew I had to hire somebody, right? And so this was 7 or 8 years ago. And this is just speaking honestly. I had thought about the support I had received at previous companies from the operations team. And the truth is, and everybody knows who's listening, that I was still waking up in the middle of the night many times a week, getting cussed out by people. And so at the end of the day, as a 30-year-old, when I was thinking about pulling, $50,000 out of my pocket to hire somebody in America to support me in operations, that really wasn't going to be there and give me that 100% entrepreneurial support that I needed. I wanted to try something different. Back then, there were people called virtual assistants in the Philippines. I'm just going to define that as an English speaker who knows how to use a computer, right? They might be good with the G Suite. They might be good with Microsoft Office. But at the end of the day, they're not classically trained business people. But nonetheless, I knew that a hard worker is what I needed. So I went to the Philippines and I met somebody named JP. For the next couple of weeks, I live broadcast everything I did on a daily basis. So answering trucker calls, negotiating on the fly, making sales calls, how to respond to angry customer emails. And about a month later, I was just extremely impressed that somebody from the Philippines could pick up freight brokerage as quickly as they could. So we started to scale again. And the story there is, I looked up 4 years later, I had about 100 people in the Philippines. Yellow Diamond was doing about 50 million a year in revenue at EBITDA margins 4 to 5 times what anybody's ever seen in logistics. And so that's when Thrivemodal kind of started, guys. And I'll allow you to jump in, just interrupt me if you want. But family friends started coming to me saying, hey, Kyle, how did you go from being a pretty stressed outbound sales rep to, running a medium-sized business? And how can you help me do that with my accounting firm, my healthcare company, or, my logistics and freight brokerage? So I opened Thrivemodal really just wanting to help a couple family friends do what I did and kind of, experience the growth of a logistics company so easily. But all of that started to change too, right? So at Emory, I had a fraternity brother. His name was Oliver Ung. The difference between me and Oliver were this, right? When he was at Emory, he was president of their business school. When I was there, I wasn't even admitted. So over the next, 15 years, he went and ran a private equity company up in New York City. And he started coming to me with wider and wider books of research, basically saying, and his story was this: it was, Kyle, every time we buy a company, say a helicopter manufacturer in Nebraska, I'm the guy that they send out there to put a CRM in and to staff the accounting department. And guess what? Almost every single time I've got to convince someone from New York City to move to Nebraska to run that department. Oliver said, from what I've seen through you and Thrivemodal, I don't think we're ever going to have to do this again. So he came to me and said, I would like to run this business with you. From there, Thrivemodal really blossomed. We had to move out of the virtual assistant era, right? So I'll define when that ended. But I couldn't provide my customers with just English speakers who were trained in logistics, who weren't deeply committed to logistics, right? If somebody fell off, that would look poorly. And so I had to solve that problem that a lot of people are experiencing today with a lot of their outsourced providers. And how we did that was I hired the best recruiters from the best companies in Manila. So ex-Ernst & Young recruiters, ex-Deloitte recruiters, who now work for Thrivemodal and go to the real career-oriented talent that's sitting in their Fortune 100 companies up in the buildings in Manila. And we say to them, hey, I'm sure you've watched these virtual assistants the last 5 to 10 years with much lower skill levels than yours, have great work-life balances, make a lot of money, have fun with US companies. And so now we're able to convince the real career-oriented candidates to move away from their awesome jobs in the Philippines and directly into US companies. So Thrivemodal really does provide career-oriented talent. And kind of the stat that we like to give that provides for that is the average tenure of a placement through Thrivemodal is 3.6 years. From what I hear, that's 7 times what anybody else in logistics outsourcing is doing today. And the reason being is we're going to the real career-oriented talent who has already worked for 2 or 3 years for a US logistics company, right? They might work for C.H. Robinson currently. They've been there for 2 years. They understand the workload of being in logistics operations, but it provides a great life for their family. And they're looking for the next step where they can, do even more for a second company. So by going to people who have been tried and true in this industry, who want to stay in it, we've eliminated that retention problem.